Good morning. We welcome Chamber members for the Searcy Regional Chamber of Commerce's next In the Know virtual series. I'm Charles Gaines, Chair of the Government Affairs Committee of the Chamber. Due to COVID-19, the Chamber is currently unable to host regular in-person events. Therefore, we are providing virtual events. Today, we are pleased to present a Searcy 1 Cent Renewal Forum. This event is being recorded and will be available for viewing by the public as a listing on the Chamber's website, the Chamber YouTube channel, and placed as a link in an email sent to the Chamber membership. We could not have these events without our sponsors and gratefully thank our following sponsors for supporting this event: First Security Bank, Unity Health, and First Community Bank. I also want to thank Buck Lang, President and CEO of the Chamber, Tara Cathy, Vice President of the Chamber, and the Government Affairs Committee for ideas, planning, and execution of this event. Tara is serving as Zoom host and will manage the presentation and recording of this event. We are privileged to have Will Moore as presenter for the Searcy 1 Cent Renewal Forum. Will represents Moving Searcy Forward, a community-led group of volunteers raising awareness for the critical need for Searcy to renew the 1 cent sales tax. Will, thank you for serving as presenter today. We will hand the event over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Chamber Board, Buck and Tara, for hosting today. And also want to say I appreciate the Chamber Board's adoption of a resolution recently in support of the 1 cent renewal. With that, Tara, I'm going to share my screen and we can get started. Okay. So from the beginning, the idea for our group has been that we wanted our awareness campaign to be one of positivity. In the past, there's been a lot of negative discourse in relation to this specific topic in the community, and our group just wanted all the conversation to be as positive as it can, for the simple reason that we all love Searcy. Searcy is a wonderful place with wonderful people. Everybody's got their reasons that they want to participate in things like this. For me personally, it's pretty simple. I've got 3 young children. This is my hometown. This is where I grew up, and I look forward to raising those 3 young children. And I hope that one day they feel about their hometown the way that I do. I think it's critical that citizens involve themselves in these types of measures, because it's, as you'll see throughout this, the 1 cent renewal will have a critical impact one way or another on all the citizens of Searcy. So the bottom line is Searcy's wonderful. We care, we love Searcy. And so that's kind of the reason we pushed ourselves to get involved. So kind of a roadmap for the presentation. Where are we now? How did we get here? And where are we going? It all started with a community-led effort following the failure of the 1 cent renewal back in February. We really began from a place of questioning the reasonableness of the renewal and the need for the renewal. We explored objective measures like Arkansas legislative audit. We reviewed the city's financials, and we kind of came to this conclusion that I hope you all agree with by the end of this presentation, that the request of the 1 cent renewal is both reasonable and it's critically needed for the city of Searcy to continue. So that all sort of culminated in a letter to the mayor and the city council in early August, reflecting our findings and with the recommendation that they take the initiative back to the voters as soon as possible. The city council adopted a measure that put it on the ballot for November 9th. And so on November 9th, the city of Searcy will have an election for the renewal of the 1 cent sales tax. Here's a look at the group of folks that participated in that recommendation. It's a group I'm really proud of. I think it's a group that represents a lot of corners of the community. You'll find people from each aspect of the community, each ward of the community. And obviously, you know, a group could always be larger, but I'm real proud of this group. It's a group of people that's put in a lot of hard work, and it's a group of people that love Searcy and is just willing to put forth effort for their community. So where are we now? the two things we asked ourselves, as I mentioned, is the request of the 1 cent renewal reasonable? And so what we wanted to do to look for answers to that question is compare Searcy's sales tax rate to other communities across the state. We also wanted to look as best we could at the big ticket items, what the city spends money on, and then some of the cost of living metrics in our community. So starting with expenditures first, we looked at police, fire, sanitation. We also look at cost of living measures like water and sewer, just to see what the impact is on both the cities and the citizens in Searcy. So the green line on all these graphs will be Searcy, and I'll point that out. And the dotted orange line is kind of the average of this group of communities. And you can see that Searcy spends below average on fire. I think it's really important to point out when talking about the fire department in Searcy that we've got an ISO 1 rating. I don't know a whole lot about that, but I do know that's the highest rating that a fire department can have. So the citizens of Searcy benefit from the highest rated fire department one can have, and we spend below average for that fire department. Our police force, speaking for myself personally, I've lived in a few places since college and law school and my early professional career, and I feel like the police presence in Searcy is really wonderful. I think Searcy's a safe and secure community, and I think the police force does a really good job of making it feel that way. You can see here that Searcy spends right at average on its police force. So between police and fire, you've got a substantial portion of the city's annual budget, and you can see that the city's a good steward of those dollars and not excessively spending on either one of those things. So we're going to look at two fees, the sanitation fee and the water and sewer fee, and these kind of go to the cost of living conversation. You can see here that Searcy's sanitation fee is below average. I like to point out, again, having lived other places, that our sanitation structure is awesome. Your bulk trash, your leaf and limb pickup, your once a week, kind of standard trash pickup, all that's rolled up in this fee. I have lived places where the bulk trash was an extra fee, or the leaf and limb was also an extra fee. And I just think our city sanitation does a really good job, and you can see that we pay below average for that service. Same with water and sewer. I've always been told that Searcy had a really good water quality, and you can see that the citizens of Searcy pay less for that on average. And so I think those two things kind of go to the cost of living in Searcy being a really good thing for the citizens. So that was a look at how the city spends money. Now let's kind of talk about how the city generates money. Cities have two primary sources of income: sales tax and property taxes. First, Searcy sales tax. This is with the 1 cent. And so the measure on November 9th simply holds this green line where it is. It's not a tax increase. We're all paying it today. It would simply continue that same tax rate. And you can see where that stacks up below average with this group of cities. Importantly, if that's allowed to expire in June of 2022, Searcy goes to where this red line is. And you can see how far below that is for all of these cities. Now, not only would that be the lowest of this group of cities, but when you look at that in the context of the other mechanism that a city has to generate revenue, property taxes, Searcy's down here at the bottom already. And so if we allow our sales tax to go to the bottom with our property tax already at the bottom, I think we can all start to see how things stack up, and our expectation for services delivered by our city would have to be adjusted. So importantly, on Searcy's property tax down here, it's 100% allocated to one thing. All of the dollars revenue generated from our property taxes goes to the police and fire retirement fund. It doesn't cover the whole obligation, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But this property tax revenue is going only to police and fire retirement. So that's a group of about 10 or 12 cities, but we wanted to go broader and have a better comparison. So this is a list of around a little over 70 cities in the state, and this is total sales tax. So oftentimes you'll hear something in the community.
What you wanna, and you can start video right here.
Okay.
Or close video.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey John, would you mind muting? So this is total sales tax here. And oftentimes you'll hear kind of in the discourse something along the lines of, well, the county tax or, something like that. I think this is a really good slide to articulate that Searcy's total sales tax is at average across the state. And then you look at the red line about where Searcy would go without the 1 cent. And you can see that we'll be in the bottom 5 across this group of more than 70 communities across the state in sales tax. So this is just the city portion of the sales tax across those same towns. The green line, well below average, is where Searcy is today. The red line is where Searcy will go. Again, the city's only asking the citizens to vote to hold Searcy's sales tax rate at where this green line is, which, as you can see, is below average across the state, and not allow it to dip down here to the very bottom. So this is total property tax. This includes the county and the school district portion of property tax, and you can see where Searcy is. We're already at the bottom across this group of more than 70 communities. And then when you look at just the city's portion, Searcy's all the way down here at the bottom. So all that kind of culminates in how the city spends and generates money, and comes to kind of leads us to some conclusions. So Searcy's got about a $24 million annual budget. They generate about $24 million. This is an audited number. And they spend about the same. That's typical for municipal budgets. You'll see it around balance like that. If the 1 cent revenues go away, Searcy faces a 27% budget shortfall. So this slide shows kind of the breakdown of revenue generation and the breakdown of expenses. But with a 27% budget shortfall, we can all envision a future where we've got to make substantial cuts that will manifest themselves in such a way that the citizens of Searcy will really feel that impact in a negative way. So the city's revenue generation can be kind of divided by population to look at a per capita revenue. So today, Searcy generates a little bit over $800 per person. That's with the 1 cent. Without the 1 cent, Searcy will generate a little bit less than $600 per person. You can see how that's well below average. I like to point out Batesville on this slide. They're at about between $1,300 and $1,400 per person. And so oftentimes you'll hear somebody say, well, Cabot's got this or Batesville's got that. Well, they've got a lot more to work with. And another point that I like to make here is that Searcy's doing a lot of really good things with less money than a lot of towns. And I think that's a really important point to show that administrations pass and our city government, councils come and go, mayors come and go, but overall administrations past have done a really good job on a shoestring budget. And then we looked earlier at how the spending has not been excessive on those big ticket items, and it's reasonable. And so you certainly don't want to face a future where Searcy has less than half the revenue of some of these other towns. So that's kind of a look at the reasonableness of the ask of the citizens. So Searcy's got a very favorable tax environment. Our property taxes are among the lowest in the state. Our sales tax is well below average. And without the 1 cent, we go to the very bottom. And again, I think we can all envision the deep cuts that would have to be made without the renewal. So how did we get here? This is a overview of kind of the history of Searcy's tax environment. You can see many things that I'm sure all of you are familiar with. I'm going to point out 2014 is when the 1 cent was enacted as an 8-year tax, which expires in June of 2022. And then in 2021, the 1 cent in February failed along with the A&P Sports Complex bond issue. So we've tried to do a little bit of research as to the line of thinking in 2014, but I think the overarching point here is that today is today and not 2014. Times have changed. The city's needs have changed. The administration is different. The council's different. But we have been told that the city faced some pretty serious fiscal distress. There were times that the city had concerns about making payroll. There were also times that the city could have taken advantage of some federal and state grants, but didn't have the cash on hand to take advantage of those. The way municipal grants work, you put money out, and then when the grant's awarded, you get that money back and then a considerable sum more. But the city of Searcy didn't even have the cash on hand at the time to put things out. So that's kind of how we got to where we are today. Again, November 9th, 2021 is a radically different environment than 2014. But we don't want to see the city go back to facing a fiscal distress environment. So where are we going? This is kind of an overview of what our group has united around. You know, I mentioned that we've wanted to focus on a positive message. This is kind of our view of what we want Searcy to be. We want it to be a vibrant community for us today and for generations to come. We want to make sure the city's got adequate funding to provide the citizens basic city services. And we want to be a community that collaborates with all of our citizens to figure out how we can raise the quality of life for everyone in Searcy. Step one is securing our basic city services. We want to make sure that we've, as citizens, have done everything we can to provide the city with adequate funding to ensure they can provide those services. So the question we ask is like, what do you need? The city answered those questions through a series of focus groups back this summer, and they've outlined the need for the 1 cent revenues. So over the course of the 7 or 8 years since the 1 cent has been discussed, $6.5 million has been the average revenue collection on an annual basis. So that's the number the city used here. You can see the breakdown of how the city sees that money being needed. You've got $1.5 million for police and fire, $2.5 million for infrastructure, which is streets and drainage and bridges, $650,000 for sanitation, economic development, courts and administration, a reserve fund, which is a savings account and a grant matching fund, and then Parks and Rec. And here's a breakdown of each of those. On the police and fire, I think it's really important to point out that $750,000 of that need is police and fire retirement. That is on top of what we talked about earlier from the property tax. This is an obligation that does not go away, regardless of how the results of the vote on November 9th. The city of Searcy still has to, this is a state mandated obligation. So the Searcy needs the 1 cent revenues to do that. We have found out through legislative audit that just about every town around the state has increased its property tax to cover its exposure to the police and fire retirement. The city of Searcy has elected not to do that. And as citizens of Searcy, I think that's something we all benefit from, but they do have to figure out a way to generate revenue to cover that obligation, and that comes from the sales tax. You can see staffing, $500,000. I know there's been some good articles of late about the staffing challenges our police force and fire department are facing. And then on fleet, the city of Searcy's got about 36 police cars and about 20 investigative and administrative cars. All those cars have a fixed useful life. They have to be replaced on a reasonable basis. And so with this fleet replacement, they're able to replace about 6 police cars a year and about 2 administrative cars a year. Streets and drainage and sidewalks. Again, you can see some staffing in there, but the $2.5 million is the city of Searcy's got over $60 million of infrastructure projects that it needs to complete. And that's above and beyond the quote unquote street fund that is kind of in the general fund today, not in the 1 cent revenue. So these are expansion and maintenance projects that are needed, that the 1 cent revenues are much needed so the city can get those done. There's a bunch of sidewalk projects in here that'll really make the community more walkable and safer for pedestrian traffic. Sanitation, the bulk of their staffing, again, the bulk of this is fleet replacement. Just like the police force, these big expensive trucks have a fixed life. They have a useful life, and it's prudent for the city to replace part of that fleet on a recurring basis to make sure that we don't return to where we were in 2014 with trash and garbage and limb trucks that were in dire disrepair. This allows the city to replace those at a reasonable rate. Economic development. This is something I've really learned a lot about and gotten excited about. The city can invest in job creation, in shovel-ready sites to attract industry. Buck and Tara could do a much better job of explaining all these dynamics, but I think it's awesome that the city wants to invest in itself. And then workforce development. And White County has got some really awesome workforce development programs, and the city of Searcy could invest and kind of put some wind in the sails and build on some of those awesome programs that our community has already got going. Courts and administration, those are just administrative costs, and you can see the staffing level that the 1 cent revenues would fund. Reserve fund, we talked a little bit about grant matching, that the city didn't have any cash to take advantage of federal grants for municipalities. And it's also a rainy day fund. And there's kind of a 90 days cash on hand calculation that took place there. But this is just, I think it's very reasonable for us to all expect our city to have a savings account. Finally, Parks and Rec. The more good things we do in Searcy, the more things there are to keep up with. And so, as we understand it, Parks and Rec has not had a budget increase in over 5 years. And so this kind of secures some additional operating funds for Parks and Rec. And again, as somebody with young kids, I want to see our parks and our soccer fields and our baseball complexes all in well-kept manner and something that the city can be proud of. So those are the needs for the 1 cent, and we've used the analogy of tires on the car. Those are the needs, the essential things that we have to have in order for our city to be vibrant and thrive. Step 2, which is really exciting and is much more fun to talk about, is quality of life. Now, it's important that as we go through this, we can't talk about step 2 until we secure step 1 on November 9th. So as fun as step 2 may be to discuss and to, kind of dream about, we have to secure our core funding before we can entertain moving to step 2. So develop a plan that's rooted in citizen feedback. The city's enlisted Craft and Toll, which is a civil engineering firm that primarily focuses on master planning for cities, I think all over the country, but certainly in Arkansas. And I like to think about this as a 5 or a 10-year plan, so that the current city administration and future administrations have some continuity. And what they really focus on is citizen feedback, not from one person, not from 10 people, not from 30 people, but from the whole community. This is a picture of downtown Conway, and I'll click through the next slides relatively quickly, but it just kind of highlights the things and the places that Craft and Toll has done work. You can see Tahlequah, Oklahoma, Hot Springs, Pine Bluff, Maumelle, McKinney, Texas. So these are all places that have got cool things going on. They do park systems, and they're professionals who contemplate things like, hey, do you need a 3-foot sidewalk or do you need a 6-foot sidewalk? Things that I'm certainly not qualified to offer an opinion on, but they're really good at their job. They kind of focus on connecting all the services, all the parks and the baseball fields and the complexes. Focus on pedestrian traffic and bike traffic, infrastructure and corridor studies, things that, taking what Searcy already has, collaborating with the community through citizen feedback and figuring out where we can make improvements. The city's bought land for Riverside Park expansion out north of town, and I think that's an awesome asset that the city's got, and Craft and Toll will be able to give us a really good objective professional opinion on how the city can best leverage that and kind of what the citizens' wants and needs are for that facility. So in conclusion, Searcy's awesome. I love Searcy. It's my hometown. Was born and raised here. Was lucky enough to have an opportunity to move back. Look forward to raising my family here. And that's kind of the why. That's why I'm involved. That's why I put in a lot of extra work to help put this together. And I think that's a common theme from our whole group. It's certainly taken a team to put this together. We want the city to have a strong foundation. We want to make sure that the citizens are given an opportunity to be informed as to why it's critical, why it's necessary, and why it's reasonable, and how Searcy's got a lot of good things going for it, including its very favorable tax environment. So we'll leave you with this slide that I think all of you will kind of be able to understand. We can only have certain expectations for our city, and we certainly don't want that to be where the red line is. We want to be able to live in a place where the city's got the funds to accomplish basic needs, and we all benefit from below average taxes and below average expenditures. And I think we should be really proud that Searcy's done more with less than a lot of communities. Takes a team. We need help. We need as many volunteers as we can muster. SearcyForward@gmail.com is where you can email to figure out how you can participate in some phone bank where this a group is making calls. We're also going door to door. We've prepared materials and are trying to just spread the word and make sure that folks have an opportunity to be aware that their vote counts on November 9th. So if you're interested, Buck and Tara can certainly get you in touch with us, but SearcyForward@gmail.com is another good contact point. We need your vote. So please vote for Searcy on November the 9th. Thank you very much, Buck, Tara. I appreciate you all, and I'll kick it back to you, Tara.
Well, thanks again to Will for an informative event and to our sponsors for supporting this event. First Security Bank, Unity Health, First Community Bank. As a reminder, this event was recorded and will be available for public viewing on the Chamber's website, the Chamber's YouTube channel, and placed as a link in an email sent to Chamber membership. Our next In the Know virtual series will be held on October 27th. Senator Jonathan Dismang and Representatives Les Eves and Jim Wooten will discuss the results of the 2020 census and the impact of redistricting on the community and their districts. They will also provide an update on the major legislation from the past legislative session. More information will be provided to Chamber members as that date approaches. Thank you for joining this virtual forum. Tara will end this Zoom meeting.